Who doesn't want more color and beauty in their life? That's why I'm into plants that reward us for years, both inside and out. That's what this show is all about. See you in 30 seconds. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to today's show. You know, I'm really excited about the topic today because it's all about mainstays in the garden, plants that I use and depend on both for my garden as well as inside the home, like old-fashioned iris. Now, these blooms are getting showier every year thanks to hybridization. We'll head off to a U-pick farm where we'll see some of the hottest colors and forms coming along. I'll also show you why lemons are a mainstay in the kitchen. And I'll cook up a sweet lemon treat. You certainly won't want to miss that. Now, garden ornaments are constants in every season. They provide beauty and interest even in the cold winter months. That's why I'll answer a viewer question about aging garden ornament and show you how you can do this too. But first, witch hazel. These beautiful, brilliant blooms may surprise you, and after this report, you'll probably want them as a mainstay in your garden home. We'll speak with an expert about this native shrub right after this, so don't go away. Several years ago, I met an exceptional plantsman named Larry Lowman. You see, Larry's passionate about native species and researches and trials them in his nursery near the forested hills in northeast Arkansas called Crowley's Ridge. Some of his favorites include magnolias and witch hazel. Now, witch hazel seems to baffle people because of its unique blooms and bloom time. We stopped to see Larry and learn more about this plant that produces such curious flowers during some of the coldest months of winter.
The first time I ever saw witch hazel, I was hiking with a friend in the woods of Perry County, Arkansas. The woods, suddenly, I just became overwhelmed with a sweet fragrance that I could not locate the source, and I began looking, and it was February, so I was astonished that there was a floral fragrance in the air. And it took about 5 or 6 minutes for me to locate these bushes with the tiniest little 3/8 or 1/2 inch flowers that almost looked like they were dried out or dead to my eye at the time. This was Hamamelis vernalis, the vernal witch hazel. And we were in a little draw, pine-covered hills, and a very rocky, lean kind of environment, and there was a little draw with a dry creek, no water in it, and down in the very bed of this dry creek, amongst all the rocks and boulders, hundreds of witch hazels were sprouting up. They were easily 6 feet higher than my head, and I got down in that creek bed and looked up at these 10-foot high twigs, and those flowers were backlit by the sun against the blue sky, and they were like little sparkling gold stars against the blue sky. And I ascertained that that's where the fragrance was coming from. So I suppose it's because it was my first encounter with a witch hazel that I really have this predilection for the vernal witch hazel. It's my favorite. But that smell just can't be beat. On a good, warm, humid spring, early spring day, it permeates the air. The witch hazels, by and large, are pretty tough cookies, as I say. They are not demanding. They're reasonably easy to transplant and establish. They have a lot of fibrous roots, and that enables them to reestablish quickly. I would go with container-grown plants if possible. Usually the bald and burlap ones have had most of those fibrous roots cut off, and I do find that they stress out pretty badly and sometimes fall by the wayside. But a container-grown plant should be easy. They are a deciduous shrub, leaf-losing shrub, so like most deciduous plants, it would be best to move them in the winter time when they're asleep, as it were. And early in the winter on the witch hazels, if possible, November, December, before they start growing. They do a lot of root growth as they begin to flower in February, even January. Other than that, they prefer more shade than sun. Any average soil. A very heavy, gummy clay would not be very appropriate. They would be unhappy there. They're used to growing in rocky soil in the mountains. But a well-drained soil of average fertility. If you water a little bit extra, they can take almost full sun, but you may have a little bit of leaf scorch that doesn't hurt the shrub. Other than that, there's no insect problems that afflict them, and no disease problems in my career that afflict them. So they're a carefree shrub.
Old-fashioned iris for cutting and planting right after this. Welcome back. I'm Alan Smith. You know I love flowers, no doubt, but the ones I really like are the ones that come back year after year, the ones I refer to as mainstays in the garden, like these iris. You know, being able to go out in the garden and cut some, even if they don't last that long in the vase, brings me great pleasure. You know, there's so many different iris you can grow, and so many of them will come back year after year. In my garden, I start with a little iris reticulata. They bloom late in the winter, soon followed by these wonderful Dutch iris. Then following those beauties, I have Siberian iris, which are very delicate and can come in some of the deepest purples you've ever seen. Then soon after they finish, well, it's the tall bearded and the tall Japanese iris, finished up with Louisiana Iris, which are so tough and reliable. They'll actually grow in wet, boggy soils. So they're great for planting where you may have heavy clay or water stands. Now, if you want to grow iris, it's a good idea to visit one of these you-pick farms when they're in full bloom. You see, the concept is simple. You pick the plants you want while they're in bloom, and once they fade, the grower will dig and mail your selections to you for planting in your own garden. There aren't many plants I would recommend that you divide and replant in the heat of summer, but there are a few exceptions. And one of those is the tall bearded iris, and that's what I'm doing today. Now that my rhizomes have arrived, I'm ready to get them in the ground. Now, a rhizome is basically a fleshy underground stem of an iris, and this piece was taken off the mother plant. Now, I know it doesn't look like much now, but you just give it a little time. For the best results, I begin by preparing the soil, and since my soils are heavy clay, I'm adding a generous dose of compost, and for added nutrient, I'm using some bone meal. I'm planting for immediate effect, meaning that I'm planting 3 rhizomes in a small triangle about 8 to 15 inches apart, each rhizome being of the same group. When I plant, I just simply spread the roots out and pull some soil up to about halfway on the rhizome. I want that rhizome to be exposed. Now I'll just water them in, and next spring I'll give them a little side dress of fertilizer and they'll bloom beautifully. Now, since I've planted them so close together, I'll have to divide them in the next couple to 3 years. But that's no big deal because I'll plant them in other parts of the garden or give them to friends. For more on these old-fashioned favorites, I spoke with Irish breeder and enthusiast Mark Grumbine.
Well, I started out in 1983. I had a small iris garden down in front of the house. And I started out with about 12 irises. And people would come driving by and look at them, and they'd say, they'd give their oohs and ahs. And one time, one person stopped and asked me whether I sold them. I told them I hadn't thought about it, but I would. They wanted to buy some. So in 1984, I went and bought, I think about 75 something irises, and planted them all along the front line there, the front fence. And from that day on, I mean, it was just a steady stream of cars coming in and out. And the parts of an iris is you have a standard, which is the top part that makes a little roof type on top. And then you have the falls, which have the lap down over top, or lap down the side. And on the fall, they have a little worm-like looking thing. It's called a beard. Well, the beard ranges anywhere from a white to a real bright tangerine orange color. I mean, it's almost red. Some of them bloom as long as 2 weeks, up to 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. Depends on the number of blossoms per bloom pod. Some of them have as high as 4, and you have branches that come off the side of the stalk. By the time they get all through blooming down to the last bloom, Could last up to about, some will last about 3 weeks.
Coming up, a visit to a California lemon farm, plus a great recipe for shaker lemon pie. But first, tips on aging containers, so don't go away. Welcome back. This is the part of the show that's one of my favorites. It's because we answer some of your viewer mail. Today, we have a letter from Joyce in Santa Rosa, California. Now, she's interested in aging some containers. She writes, "We need to age several large new pots to fit into both our interior and exterior decorating scheme. We'd like these pots to have a patina of well-worn clay. Do you have any suggestions on how to accomplish this?" Well, it's really easier than you think to transform ordinary clay pots into what you might consider a 200-year-old masterpiece. The English have a time-honored method for aging concrete that involves buttermilk and sheep manure. However, not everyone has the stomach for that. But a more pleasant way to achieve the same effect is to use a little paint with some water. The first thing you'll want to do is get the paint right. I use a water-based latex exterior paint. When it comes to choosing a color, the grungier the better. I think a gray-green works great. Next, dilute the paint with water, about half and half. The mixture should be the consistency of tomato soup. Then just slop it on your containers with a paintbrush. Before it dries, wipe off the excess with a clean rag or damp sponge, leaving traces of color in the crevices. Now, the finishing touch and real secret to this technique is to rub the container down with some weeds or grass. The green juice helps to blend the colors and makes the container look as if it's been outdoors for several seasons. And there you have it. In an instant, the container goes from being brand new to one that appears much older and blends better with the landscape. Now, this technique will work both on concrete and terracotta. Now, if you'd like other ideas on how to give your garden an aged look, just check out my website. That's pallensmith.com. You can sign up for my weekly newsletter, and there I answer common viewer questions. Now, one other idea that I like to use to give a garden a more mature look is to use plants that mature quickly, like climbing roses. It's a trick I've used for years in many of the gardens I've designed. Just take a look at the way this new dawn has taken over the stone wall of this home. Caring for roses is much easier than you might think, but there are times when you do need to treat them for disease. This time of year, the biggest challenge for me in producing outstanding roses is black spot. This is a fungus that can completely defoliate your plants if it gets a good start and goes unchecked. As the name implies, it starts with a black spot on the leaf. Now, I've never had a rose bush actually die from black spot, but it can certainly cut down on their performance and make the shrubs look pretty shabby. Not all roses are created the same. You see, they respond differently to the fungus, just as we respond differently to viruses. For instance, some of the popular hybrid tea roses are the most susceptible, whereas this old-fashioned rose, Lamarck, which I grow over my tool shed, has been virtually unaffected by black spot. All of this is to say that certain varieties are just more susceptible to black spot than others. So when choosing a rose for your garden, select varieties that are more disease resistant. To better control the spread of the disease, start spraying as soon as you see the first spots. And if the problem has advanced, even spray the ground around the plants to kill the spores of the fungus. When life hands you lemons, make lemonade and shaker lemon pie. The recipe and a tour of a lemon farm coming up next. For many gardeners, there's real satisfaction in growing some of your own produce, like that perfect tomato, or even a few herbs for cooking. But when it comes to lemons, most gardeners across the country have to depend on someone else to supply them. With the lemon harvest underway at the Fairview Road Ranch in Soledad, California, Kirk Williams and his family are busy with their 800 acres of lemons.
Lemons are producing flowers and fruit all year long, and we get about 4 major harvests throughout the year, starting in February, and then we harvest again in about June and August, and then wind it up in September and October. And we harvest by size of the fruit principally, and then anything that's tree ripe will also, or yellow, we would also harvest that. Throughout the year, for 4 different harvests, we can get about 400 pounds of lemons off of this tree.
Really?
Yeah, and it's about 17 years old right now.
What sort of life expectancy can one hope for with a lemon tree?
We're real hopeful here that these can go 50 or 60 years old.
Kirk also pointed out to me that for lemons with the most juice, try to select those that have maintained some of their slight green cast rather than those that are completely yellow. All right, now let's put some of these lemons to work in the kitchen. I'm preparing a shaker lemon pie, which is one of those great old-fashioned dishes. I especially like this one because it uses the entire lemon, well, except for the seed. Now for this pie, you'll need a double pie crust and a deep dish 9-inch pie pan. Now you can make it easy on yourself by using one of these pre-made pie crusts. You can pick them up at the grocery store in the dairy section. Now I'll start with 5 medium-sized lemons, and I'll remove all of the zest first. Add this zest to 2 1/4 cups of sugar and 6 large eggs and whip it all together. Save one of the egg whites for the crust. Slice 5 of the lemons as thin as possible and remove the seeds, and then add the lemon slices to the mixture. I simply pour the mixture into one of the shells and cover with the remaining. Just pinch the edges together, cut a few slits in the top, and brush on the extra egg white. Now I'll bake this in a preheated 350-degree oven for about an hour. This lemon pie is excellent served with fresh whipped cream, a sprinkle of powdered sugar, and a sprig of mint for a beautiful presentation. It's a delicious taste of summer that anyone would want to try. I guarantee you, after you taste that shaker lemon pie, you'll know why I consider lemons a mainstay in the kitchen. Just like I consider irises and shrubs such as witch hazel and old-fashioned roses mainstays for the garden. Well, that's all the time we have for today's show. I hope you've picked up a few tips that'll help make your home more beautiful. Until next time, from the garden, I'm Alan Smith.
In this garden I dream of a bed of flowers. Bluebirds sing of the beauty all around us. And every time the sun comes out, I can't help but smile. Oh, no, I can't help but smile.